Sort of a theme we've been having is the idea of, perception is reality. You've been saying that the Australian public, the view of China has fallen off a cliff. What is being done to sort of manage the perception of China, both within the government and in Australian society at large? Is it just something that's naturally happening as the Australian media is reporting on issues like Hong Kong, the Uyghurs, or is there anything that can be done to really clarify in people's minds what the Chinese Communist Party is, especially when you have politicians who are arguing for recoupling?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Chris. And I'd say that this trip that former Prime Minister Tony Abbott made to Taiwan over the last couple of days is one of those efforts. Now, he did that as a private citizen and probably in response to exactly what you're saying, because he's probably heard, well, he certainly would have heard the Australian Labor Party start saying these sorts of things and getting back into their old habits. And he also wanted to support Taiwan. So I think yes, I think we do need a more concerted effort. And as always, we're led by what you guys do. So anything the United States does, we listen to. There used to be that catchphrase in Australia, all the way with LBJ. So we've fought alongside the United States in every single conflict you've been in, and Vietnam was just one of them. So I think certainly leadership from the United States would be really beneficial. And Shelley was talking about, the China issue being bipartisan in the United States. And I've kind of seen the talk over China has slackened a little bit from US government sources over the last number of months. And you've seen that your trade representative is talking about perhaps reducing some tariffs on some certain things with China that had been put in place by the former Trump administration. The conference that they had up in Alaska was kind of embarrassing. I certainly think that given you are the world's sole superpower, you really could perhaps do more in terms of leadership on the China question. And that would be of great benefit to the region, including Australia.
Are there specific things you'd like to see?
Well, I'd like to see the administration come out and talk about it and talk about the situation with the Uyghurs. Talk about what happened in Hong Kong and maybe perhaps tie that to the situation that we're seeing in Taiwan. We've seen reports that perhaps there has been over the last year, which would put that policy back into the Trump administration, that there's been US Special Forces and Marines in Taiwan. Now, they mentioned a couple of dozen. It's not really all that many. So perhaps talk about doing more exercises with the Taiwanese, perhaps bring them into joint military exercises that the United States already does with countries like Australia. So we exercise all of the time. Militaries exercising together is crucial because when you're going to fight together, it's like playing, American football or a rugby. If you don't train together, you're really not going to play the game very well, right? So, I think that sort of, I'm not saying that the administration should come out and say that Taiwan should declare its independence. I'm just saying that perhaps by taking some more concrete measures and perhaps talking about it a little more would certainly help the region and certainly Australia also.
Now, you mentioned this sort of, idea that Australians have fought with the U.S. in different wars since Vietnam, right? LBJ all the way, right? But, given how, Vietnam didn't seem to end very well and Afghanistan didn't end particularly well, are Australians a bit averse maybe to getting involved in another American war? Or do they see it that way if it came to defending Taiwan?
Yeah, so I wasn't alive. Well, I was alive at the end of the Vietnamese War. It's a good question, and I think it's a case that we need to make to the Australian public. So certainly the Australian public, as we discussed before, has an affinity with the Taiwanese people, certainly doesn't want to see them crushed and their freedom and democracy taken away. However, it's a different story if you're the government, when you want to put Australian lives at risk. I think as we talked about before, there's certainly a very strong argument, case, truth, fact to be made to the Australian public of why Taiwan's independence or its freedom, its current status, is crucial to our own sovereignty and future sovereignty. So I think you can, if you're a good communicator, I think you can make that case relatively easily that if for nothing else, it's in our own interests to defend Taiwan. So hopefully you would think that other nations would feel the same. But I think perhaps former Prime Minister Tony Abbott's trip is probably the thing to kick that off. It's getting a lot of airtime. It's getting a lot of coverage over here. And I think that perhaps that's going to get the ball rolling to start having more of those sorts of discussions over, it looks like push is coming to shove, and that China is getting close to wanting to take Taiwan. And Australia should be doing something about that and standing shoulder to shoulder with them. Obviously, it's never easy to talk about war. No one really wins with war. What we would hope to do is to free Taiwan, or at least, get the Chinese communists to back off. Well, I guess the best outcome is that China doesn't attack them at all, but, that's not looking positive.
Well, deterrence is certainly a major part in preventing a war. And besides just AUKUS, Australia is also a part of the Quad, which has seen, a new life in the past couple of years. What is the relationship between Quad and AUKUS? All these new security alliances obviously aimed at China.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Chris. I mean, they're all aimed at China, and the Quad is, it's a partnership between four countries who are all facing a common enemy. You've got Japan, who are obviously geographically very close to China. You've got India, who share, a border on the Himalayas with China and have been attacked. They had that dust up not that long ago. And in fact, I think we just had another incursion on the Himalayas yesterday, where some PLA soldiers accidentally wandered into Indian territory. The Quad is super important because it brings, the world's largest democracy in India together with the United States, Japan, and Australia. And I think between, those four countries, particularly as AUKUS perhaps kickstarts Australia's defence capabilities, it brings, perhaps as you were saying, Chris, it could be a mechanism that prevents China from taking any overt steps to taking Taiwan. Although I think you have to ask yourself, the question is that going to stop Communist China from taking Taiwan now, or is it just going to delay it?
I mean, is it better if they attempt it now versus delaying it?
Well, militarily, you'd have to think so. It would be good if we could potentially fortify Taiwan a little bit better and perhaps include them in some joint wargaming and practice exercises and those sorts of things in order for the good guys to be better prepared. But at the same time, the longer it goes on, the stronger the Chinese military becomes. I mean, we've seen their navy now become the largest navy in the world, and it's not just their navy; they have a maritime militia. You can double-hulled boats that they have, or double-hulled ships can do a lot of damage. So I think the longer, in some senses, you wait, the more powerful they become, And if they can deny access to the region to the Americans, or anybody for that matter, then, it's all over.
So it sounds like the delay, basically, it depends what we do with the time.
Yeah, that's probably a fair point, Shelley. It depends on what we do with the time. And, to give the US government their due, they've initiated AUKUS together with us and the POMs. The Quad seems to be going quite well. Perhaps we could start doing more with Taiwan. So, yeah, I think we're using that time quite well, but I think China are also using that time. So, we've seen just in the last few months, look at the number of intercontinental ballistic missiles they have stood up across western parts of China. Look what they're doing with their jet incursions in Taiwanese airspace, including one of their newest aircraft that's similar to a Growler, so an electronic warfare, an EW sort of aircraft. So they looks like they're training and preparing to attack pretty quickly.